meeting to order at 4:35 p.m. We have a properly posted agenda and a quorum present. Item number 2 is public forum. Nobody signed up. Item number 3, long-range facility planning. Brett?
Thank you. Is this on? Do I need to push a button? Push the red one? Now I'm on? Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you all for letting me come here tonight. It is. Okay. I hate microphones. So I guess last time I was here was actually November when we talked about kicking this off, and then you had your meeting in January. So really have 3 kind of big agenda items for tonight. 1 and 2 are really the most important, and then 3 we'll get into. So the first is talk about the logistics of this and this process and getting it going. The first is talking about the committee membership and what that looks like. The second is we'd really like to narrow down, or at least, the draft version of the meeting logistics, and then can talk about kind of the preview of some of the meeting discussions. I do have, we are putting together the 4 presentations, and I do have some of that assembled for today that we can go through briefly if we have time. So that's what that looks like. So first off, committee membership. So we've already identified that all of the current board members, all of y'all will be on the committee. So these will be public board meetings. Community members. So since I was here last, the list, was between 30, 35, and now I think we said it's 130 community members that have signed up. I don't know if that's because more people came out when they heard about it, or some of y'all, asked people or helped get the word out. And if so, that's great. And thank you, because this is a really big number. It is a big number, which because of this, we may think about some of how we facilitate some of the discussions so that it's not just one group, everybody trying to talk on top of each other. But I guess the question is, since this list keeps growing, have you all seen the updated list? Maybe not yet. So no. Okay, so then I think if we get this list out and then see, really the thing is the people who have expressed interest, and then if there's anyone that we want to invite that didn't sign up on their own would be the only thing, if there's anyone we want to add. And that would really be up to y'all in your questions. What we're going to ask these people to commit to is to attend hopefully all 4 of our scheduled meetings. Tentatively, there could be a 5th if the discussion needs to go on. But we're hoping for some commitment from this. Understand things happen in scheduling logistics, but that's the ask of these. In addition, it will be public that we talked about. So public attendees could still come. We will have a sign-in sheet, so we will know who's there. And so people can come to one or all of those meetings. And just because they're not on this list does not mean they don't get to contribute if they're here for that one. Hopefully, if there's public that wants to come that's not on the list, hopefully they sign up. And if not, hopefully they come to most of the meetings so that they get that history and that background that we're going to share, especially in the first 2 meetings. So is there any questions about that or concerns, or do we think the district is good to start with this list? I know y'all haven't seen it, but.
Yeah, we'll send that. Matter of fact, we had a couple send in just today. We're getting 1 or 2 every day almost, new people. But I want to thank everybody that's in the audience today and make sure that you understand basically what we're doing before this board meeting and before the February board meeting. We're doing board workshops to just kind of talk about the logistics, the plan, how many facility meetings we're going to have, all those things. And then the board kind of talked last time with Brett about possibly starting with this committee in March. So what will happen, everybody that's on that list will be sent an email or an invite to say this is when the meetings are once we have that scheduled down. So I just wanted y'all to know kind of where we were.
Well, and in addition to that, once the meetings are scheduled, these lists will be sent invites, but in addition to that, there will be a public information campaign, social media, on your webpage, those type things, postings to invite the community at large if they want to come and contribute as well. So is everybody good on that? I think that pretty much settles this agenda item. The next thing we want to talk about is logistics. We talked a little bit about this in November when we started talking about how quickly we wanted to go through this process might determine this. So, and then of course you had asked for, and I think this was distributed to you at your December board meeting, which I was not able to be at. But this was how we saw the meetings breaking down in terms of really the first two meetings are, it's really informational. You know, it's kind of from our side directed at the attendees to get them kind of a background in kind of facility planning, some of the requirements we have to follow, and then some of the current situation that the district is in. Then the third meeting and the fourth meeting is really where a lot of the conversations and the work happens as we start to develop the plan from the community. So seeing that the target is 4 meetings, it could stretch to 5 just depending on consensus, especially with this large of a group, if that just entails more conversation. But that being the case, have you all put any thoughts to cadence of these meetings? Like I said, we tentatively said start these in March. I would think after spring break. And then if you want to do them, some districts do these once a month. We have done them quicker. We have done them bi-weekly or every 3 weeks. It's just how much do we want to ask of people to, you know, for that commitment. So this is, I'm really wanting to hear from y'all on that.
I mean, I think once a month, at least to start, so we kind of know what direction is going.
Is everybody in agreement? We kind of say once a month? Okay. And then the first meeting, kind of second half of March. When is your March board meeting? You know?
It's March 25th, the regular schedule.
Spring break is the 15th. So we could do it that week of the 18th.
Yeah, that's fine to start the week of the 18th. Is there a preference on day of the week?
We might need to check schedules. Sometimes that's the only issue. Some people's schedules don't come out till
Right.
First of March. So we know the first of March.
Know the schedule the 1st of March?
It's usually Scott's schedule. I think he knows it like a couple, at the end of he'll know it at the end of,
Would he know it in a way to where we can say, okay, all of the meetings will be on, so it might change month to month and he wouldn't necessarily know.
but I mean, I think if he knows in advance from our conversations, he could probably work around that. I mean, let me ask him.
Well, the only reason I was asking was so that we can communicate, because ideally we would put the schedule and the dates of every single meeting when we kick this thing off and not have to change that for people coming in.
Especially if you're talking about 130 people on there, plus 7 of us. Much as we love to have everybody be there every time, I think you're going to have to post it in advance, like you're talking about.
I agree. Okay, so then it sounds like we might, so we'll say first one the week of the 18th, and then we can look. So then we looked at your board meeting dates for the next several months. Maybe we just say it's the week before your board meeting.
Like the Wednesday before.
Okay. So how about we do that? If y'all are good with that, tentatively we'll say the Wednesday before your board meeting, but then we'll hear from Scott on his schedule when he knows. We'll make sure that to nail that down. Or maybe he can go ahead and commit to that, to working around those dates if he's going to have to do that with the others, but let him have some input on that as well. But tentatively, that's what we'll say.
What time?
That's my next question.
How long do they typically last?
So normally on these, and what I always say is that I'm willing to stay as long as the group wants to, because it's the committee's meeting. However, At some point, when you get 3-4 hours, you lose it. You know, typically we don't see them going any more than 2 hours. Sometimes we'll schedule them for an hour and a half. An hour won't be enough time. So
We set it at 2.5 hours.
I wouldn't do, so my recommendation would be 2 hours. And then that way, if people want to stay a little bit longer, you can decide to, or we commit. I think if we go in saying 2.5 hours for everyone, some people will be turned off just by that commitment. That's my opinion, but it's up to y'all.
I think we need to do 6 o'clock, if you're not earlier. If we have 130 people that are signing up for this committee, we have to remember that they have
Yeah.
work schedules.
And we could, you know, if we said, hey, we don't want it to be longer than an hour or an hour and a half, we just may have to break it up, and maybe it's 5 instead of 4 if we want to do that.
I think 2 hours starting, yeah, I think 5:36, something like that, after hours.
Yeah, and when we say 2 hours, it doesn't have to go 2 hours, but
Yeah,
2
maybe
hours
not
max. But
necessarily.
yeah, if we schedule 6 to 8 and we get through it by 7:30. Okay. So with the group, this room hold 170 people? It will. So it's going to have to be in here versus over there. The only thing about this room is when we start thinking about some of the conversations, we'll just have to figure out what
We
because
have rooms around, little conference rooms like we've done in the past, when you break up into groups and you may have a group leader, and you're going to talk about certain things, and then each group come back and report. We can spread out all over this building.
that's the question, because we'll just need to think, since the group is the committee membership has grown so much since last time. Usually when we have really big groups, in order for everybody to be able to voice, you know, their opinion, sometimes we'll break into smaller groups so people can talk in smaller groups and then come back together and each group report up what they were said, versus trying to get through everybody at one time. We did hear at one place that we did that, and then someone felt like they got to vote at their small table, but not the big. So we do want to make sure that everybody's voice gets heard all the way through. But that may be something we need to look at logistically, just because of the number of people. But it would start in here. Potentially, we could have breakout.
Mr. Knowles had an idea, we could do them like at the MPB where there's seating, like cafeteria type seating with the stage. And then also, this wasn't a high school cafeteria, so there are options in the district where, because that's another negative of here is you're sitting almost in a theater type. It's hard, like if you're taking notes or you're actually working, it's hard to juggle all that, so there's some options there.
We usually do like the idea of being able to sit at tables, because it kind of fosters more conversation versus this setting.
I would say your MPB might be a better option, because trying to get things, just personal experience, like honest reading, and it actually connecting, I think everybody can vouch for that at the high school. Doesn't always happen, so.
You can vouch for it
Plus
right
the
now.
events at the high school, there's a lot more events in the evenings, maybe that might be harder.
So actually, the MPB would be a good one, especially because I think McCarroll's going to be a big conversation, and being right there. I don't know, as a part of this, if y'all want to do facility tours. I really don't think we need to, unless y'all want to. Maybe with the exception of McCarroll. So let's just plan for the MPB. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And then if we want to do a tour of the trail, that will be easily accessible.
Right. Okay, so that's kind of all I had on the logistics and getting through, so that we can start putting that plan and some of that communication together and planning for that. Did y'all look through this last time on kind of and it's, a lot of this was kind of the organization of what we had talked about in November. But were there any questions, things that you saw that you had questions about or that you didn't see that you want to make sure we include? Okay, well then, since I have time left a little bit, I want to go through just quickly kind of how we're organizing this, and not to dive into the actual material itself, because we'll do that when we get in it. And this is still a work in progress. I mean, you'll see it's incomplete, but I do want to show you, it's really this first meeting, and I do have a couple of questions on what y'all, I have a recommendation, but I want to see what y'all think on a couple of things, how we present some of this. So this is just the first draft of meeting number 1, going over the agenda. It's going to start with the committee purpose, and I want to make sure we talked about this last time. Communicate, this is not a bond committee. And then we'll kind of talk about what a long-range plan is, and then what's our role, because we said that I was going to, Corrigan will facilitate this, and I'm going to have someone else with me. But I'll make sure everybody understands that our role is not to decide for you, that our role is purely to facilitate the conversation, to provide options to you, and to answer your questions. And we can bring our expertise and experience to say, here's what we've seen in other places, but ultimately it's y'all's decision, not ours. And I want to make sure that is very clear. These were the goals of the committee that we were recommending, but I want to hear from y'all, get a little bit of feedback, but basically set the direction for the district for the next 10 years. Address growth, plan for the anticipated increase in student population. And I know y'all are going to get your updated demographer's report tonight, so you'll see that. I haven't seen that yet. Address aging facilities, because you do have some, and planning for the life cycle replacement of building systems, which we do get into some detail on that. And then provide for student opportunity. Does that make sense to all of y'all? Do you agree with those 4? And is there something else that you might want to include? I mean, these are fairly standard for these types of planning committees. I didn't want to tell the group this without y'all agreeing with it. The next thing that we always do in the first meeting is set the decision-making process, specifically what is consensus, because we don't want to get to the end. We want to do that up front. So we will do that in the first committee as well. That will help inform as we get to kind of the final votes at the end on what this plan is going to look like.
Brett, what's the largest group you've ever worked with? Community.
So the largest one we've had, and this is the thing about your 130, was about 80, 85. However, there's always attrition. And just because that was the size of the committee, they didn't all show up every night. So it'll be interesting to see if all 130 show up. If so, it'll be the first time, to every meeting. However, if they do, that's great, because it shows how many people are invested in your district, and not just what you're doing today, but the plan, for this is to, to set the direction, the plan as it relates to facilities for the next 10 to 15 years. Which is another reason why we kind of need to think some of those logistics and the location and how we broke up, so that people, feel like they get their voice heard in a group of 130 plus. District information, I kind of showed this before. This is straight from your strategic plan. The goals, I'm going to show the campuses, the current feeder pattern. This is something I wanted to show you. So this was the assessment, and get your feedback. This was the assessment that that the district had TASB do. Gosh, it's almost 5 years old now. 4 years, 4 years ago, 2020. The plan is not to go into, this is just the cover sheet. I'm not going to get out of here and show you. The plan is not to go into the all of the details of it because they really don't matter for what we're doing here, other than the idea is to show that, look, facilities age and portions of facility age. And the interesting thing, and you can dial into any one of these campuses and get much and get much more detailed as to what makes these numbers up. So there's a summary, there's findings. But this is what I wanted to show. So there's this FCI, this Facility Condition Index, and that I do want to explain to the committee what that is. That basically it's the idea, and the term is deferred maintenance, but it's a little misleading. But it's the ratio of deferred maintenance dollars to the replacement of the whole facility. The thing about the deferred maintenance, that's not regular maintenance. It's not, it's not changing air filters and that makes a unit go bad. It's even when you change all the air filters, eventually that unit wears out. It's that second part. But the higher that number, the more, the more it costs to kind of keep that building running. And usually there's a tipping point when people start thinking about not just replacing individual systems, but replacing the entire building. That tipping point, I've seen some districts, it's as low as 60%. Some will go to 75 or 80%. What TASB on their little charts that they used, well, I'll just show you. So this is actually your facilities that they did. So you can see all your elementaries are in the green, and they're very low. And Young is the lowest, which you would expect. It's the newest. McCarroll is in the red. It's almost 80%, 79%. And then the high school is in the green too. So the point of this is this right here shows that as there's going to be things to do to maintain those buildings. However, I think this is what I think leads to more conversation about McCarroll. The question is, do you think the committee will want to get into the weeds of that? Because I prefer not to, unless they ask questions.
I'm just curious, why would you not want to go into that?
Well, I mean, we can show it. So what I would do is probably just like big picture stuff. Well, here, I'll show Carol. Or that's just it, or maybe that is it. Maybe we
It's so public about McCarroll, everybody knows, so it's kind of.
Well, and that's what I mean. So maybe we do dig into McCarroll, but not necessarily the others. Because I don't know that you need to dig into the others. They're green. There's some scheduled things, but so McCarroll, I mean, the big part of it that we know is, and once again, this was 4 years ago. A lot of it's, this is the HVAC. The roof, I think, is 2006. So the roof's actually okay. It's getting close to it, but it's okay. A lot of it is, it's a bunch of things, and then there's pictures. Big part of McCarroll on top of this that doesn't show up. Is the TEA and accessibility issues, because they didn't look for that. But the restrooms aren't accessible, and so there's some other stuff on top of that you have to do. But yeah, we can get into so there's some of those pictures that they have of the details of it. Okay, so maybe we do dig into McCarroll more.
Is this something, Brett, that could be online where people could do their own research to see what you're talking about? What does that look like? So what we haven't done a facility assessment of McCarroll. We're relying on this one that TASB did. Right.
There is a login that the district has, and I have one that they gave me to the portal, but it's an individual. It would be you would have to give everybody an individual log on, which I doubt you want to do. Right. Now, what we could do though is we could extrapolate from this a presentation for them and include it that would have some of that detail. It's probably going to be more a summary with some detail without listing every single line item. We could do that.
Probably.
Dylan, you think we should look at doing that and letting that information be out there so we're not wasting the time in a meeting?
So my opinion, because everything we do, we want to do it for a reason. My opinion is the question we're trying to get to is, which is later, is McCarroll, the building itself, part of the long-range plan of the district, or is the long-range plan that McCarroll needs to be replaced? That's the question. And I don't want to answer that, but we want to give all of the factual information for it.
I just to throw out there, this was a 3-year agreement with Cassie. We just finished last year paying the third.
So we're going to lose access to this?
I did not remove this because to me, the assessment's already been done. We know where we've been since the 2020. I have until March to download that full
Yeah.
website information, put it into the which is what the plan is. But I don't continue unless I'm told different. It was another 20 grand to continue with having access to that. And then obviously they updated, like if you look at the Carson Mechanical, we used Carson quite a few summers ago. I sent them multiple pages of documentation of the units that we're replacing this, and they wouldn't have updated that. I feel like that's something we can do at district level.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
But we do that until March to take this information off of that dashboard, download it into a manual so that we have it. But that's where we're at.
I definitely think we need to put anything we can about that report online for people to see. The most transparent we can be about every campus. That way, they can't say they couldn't see it.
Right back to your, what you were asking a while ago, I mean, I do think we need to focus on the overall long-range strategy for the entire district. And so I understand your concern about getting into the weeds on Carroll, but I think we definitely need to be prepared to talk about that, because I know that's going to be the one topic that is going to come up from the committee, or probably from many members of the committee. They're going to ask what.
Well, and I agree. And some of, when you look at the FCI on McCarroll, for example, and I will tell you what the big picture that makes that up is the mechanical and the roof, which, we had some price if you're going to continue the building, those systems have to be replaced. Another big part of McCarroll, though, part of this number is an addition for the added enrollment that's there too, on top of that. So, okay. So then what we'll do is for this, we'll focus on the high level for the facilities. We will dig down to more of a summary of McCarroll into some more detail, but then we'll find a way to make the entire report available for the public. Okay, that makes sense. Let me see. So this is basically showing the different systems of the buildings and the life cycle of each one and the expected years you should get out of it. And I give an example, and I'm planning to give an example unless y'all tell me not to. What I hear a lot when you start talking about life, because when you look at the long-range plan, part of the long-range plan is for these buildings. If we say a building is going to last 50 plus years, but there's components and systems within those buildings that don't last that long, that have to be replaced along the way. That's what this is. We do hear a lot when we're talking about let's say you had to replace a roof on a building. And what we hear is, well, you should have known that you were going to have to do that someday, so you should have saved the money to do it. And so the example I have is Carson, when the mechanical equipment failed at Carson, and it cost about $3 million to replace all of that. And on that equipment, the life expectancy is 15 years. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go 18 years, or sometimes 20 years, because you can. But at some point, we have to say, we're going to plan for this. And it's either 100%, maybe it's 120%. And we say, we want to plan for 18 years, whatever, that replacement. But let's, for argument's sake, say 15 years. So the district should have saved that $3 million over 15 years. But you've got to understand, you've got 6 campuses. So it's 4 elementary schools at $3 million apiece. A middle school that the size is just barely built bigger, so say another $3 million, and a high school that's 3 times the size, so $6 million. So that's a total of $21 million over a 15-year period that you would have to save out of M&O in order to do that. That does not include any kind of escalation in costs. And that's only mechanical systems. That does not include your roof. That does not include your food service equipment. Now, they're different ranges. They're not all, roof will go 30 years and food service equipment go 20, 25. But the example is all those things overlap as well. So that's what I want to get across there. This is a placeholder slide to get into the TEA requirements. Number 2, we'll have the demographic report, planning to talk about finances, do a budget summary, high level, real high level. Do we want to discuss transfers? I think the answer is yes, because that is a real thing in your district. And there's a lot of people all think they know, everybody has an opinion on transfers. There's positives to transfers, there's negatives to transfers. So I think that should be something that we talk about, because it is money, it is money for the district in terms of your revenue, but it's also seats that you have to have and, some use some facilities and things like that. So do y'all agree transfers should be part of this? Is there anything else on finance? There's one more thing that I thought about. I didn't necessarily want to put it in here. I've had some other districts ask about it. Problem is we don't know the answer yet. And that is, if vouchers ever gets passed, what does that do to our district? But that thing is such a big thing, and it's kind of a lightning rod. I wouldn't talk about it because we really don't know the answer. It would all just be assumptions anyway. Okay, so I looked it out. So here's when we get into the third one, is when we get into the questions that we want to have answered with this plan. Elementary schools, I believe, is going to be one of the easier conversations. And these are the questions that we're asking. What is the ideal size? What's the ideal location? What grade levels should be included? And that is a reference to, you used to have a 5th grade center. Sorry, 6th grade center. Well, actually, had intermediate, it's 5 and 6. And then what amenities should elementary have? And the things about that we'll look at is, and then what amenities should elementary have? And the things about that we'll look at is, the parent drop-off that works. What type of playground, play field, those type things. To kind of set, here's an ideal. It doesn't mean all of your schools right now will meet that definition. It doesn't mean they ever have to. But it means here's kind of the ideal setting as we plan for the district. The middle school, it's kind of the same questions, but it does ask the question about McCarroll. And when I ask about McCarroll, it's really that building. Now, if the committee wants to start getting into, well, then what are the options? What are we going to do? The purpose here is not to solve the problem necessarily, but we can say, well, here's the options. You could build a new school somewhere else. You could build a new school in the field next door, or a portion of it next to the MPB, and tear down the old one. There's things that we can talk about what ifs, but that's not necessarily part of this, other than to say in the long range plan, you're either going to say McCarroll is part of the long range plan of the district and should be brought up to X standards, or as a part of long range plan, the old McCarroll middle school building, the main building, will be replaced. I mean, that's really what it gets down to. And then when you get into the high school, question about one high school, multiple high schools, one as long as possible. And so that will be a conversation starter. And I do imagine people will get into, well, if we do one, how long will this one last, whatever. And we can show work we've already done to show, well, here's how big we could realistically make it. And here's how long that would last you, potentially to add a 9th grade center and have that, still be your high school and a 9th grade center, might be adjacent, might be 2 miles away, or a brand new high school somewhere else. And so that's part of that conversation on the high school. Whoops, that's elementary. So along with all of those three schools, here's my question for you. Do we want to ask those questions open-ended? Or do we want to provide them a starting point to say yes or no? For example, on the elementary school, the recommendation of the school district would be an enrollment of a 750 capacity, and that they want to be neighborhood schools, located within neighborhoods. And go and say, hey, this is what the district thinks. Do y'all agree or disagree? Do you have an opinion there? Versus just asking the question open-ended. How many kids do you
And I
want?
guess I wonder if I'm in another business, not in education, doing some, do I know what the ideal size, or if research has been done to say this is the best academic environment for students? Like I've always heard, if you get too many in a middle school, for example, or too many in an elementary, it becomes, unless you have like schools within schools, or.
Yeah, and we could,
STEM, I think would be it.
you what?
Like the STEM, like the sentence stems, like you're starting it off with like, these are some of the key things that you think are, ideal.
Yeah.
in elementary settings,
Well-
middle school settings.
Well, and we could get input, from your department, from some principals on, here's kind of ideal from their perspective.
Yeah, and teachers, I think if we can include teachers at some point, this is it.
So wouldn't one of the big things there be, what does our demographics look like, and where we're gonna put new elementary schools or even a middle school? Because to me, the elementary school, we only need to build it as big as what it's gonna be for the next 10 years.
So typically what we would do is, and the reason we show the demographics is to pull it in this conversation, although I don't have those numbers yet. I mean, y'all are about to get them. To say, as if the conversation would be, okay, right now, the capacity of our elementary schools, if you look at all, including Ennis, all four of them is, I don't know what the number is, 2,500. I don't know. And if you're projected to grow to, let's say, 4,000 kids within the 10 years, so we know we're going to need to account for 1,500 kids. And I'm making these numbers up. These aren't necessarily the numbers. But how do we do that? You can either add on to the existing one. You can build two new schools at some point. Where do they go? We don't know that yet. And it might be part of this plan would be, but we want to tell the school district, hey, you need to start looking for sites based on where these houses are projected to go, based on the demographic reports, and consider purchasing land ahead of time. Now, we don't get into the funding mechanism just yet, because there's different ways to do that, but that would be part of it. We don't get to the point to say, here's where it will go, because we don't know that yet. But if, let's say we said 750 kids is ideal, then it would mean at some point we're going to do 2 new elementary schools. Or it might be, hey, we want to add on to the ones we have and get to 1,000 each. And you may not need to build any new ones. But now you got 1,000 kid elementary schools. What are the pros and cons of each of those? That's where those discussions can go. Trying to think. Don't get old, because I had
Do you normally start with a number? When you ask that question, is it normally open-ended or is it normally closed?
Usually districts look at kind of what they already have and say, okay, right now our elementary schools are 750 or 720. And so is that a good, and then go up and down from there. That's probably what I would do.
I don't think you want to leave it open-ended.
I don't
It's
either.
really confusing.
Well, and people don't always have all the background anyway.
Right.
Pros and cons.
We need to rely on the experts who've been in the education field for a long time, that they've seen what works and what doesn't, and then say that's what it was, and then see what the community says.
Yeah, and it's real easy for us to talk about what we've seen in other places, because 750 to maybe 800 is probably what we see most of the time. We've done a few that are 950, pushing 1,000, and typically where I've seen that is where basically a district, they didn't have projected growth to need 2 schools. They just needed 1, and it was able to, they were able to build at 950 and accommodate all their growth, because they were kind of locked and they were at the end of their growth. The other thing that we'll probably ask is about, okay, so if you're going to need two at some point, and I'm just making these numbers up, this is not what it is. How do we handle the growth until then? And it might be, hey, we wanted the district to handle that growth with, with portable buildings up until 120%, 115%, whatever that is of the enrollment. And we can talk about what that looks like as well, because it's easy to put classrooms in portables. Where it starts getting stretched as that number gets bigger and bigger is all of your core spaces, your your gym, your cafeteria, your library, those type things. But that'll be part of that conversation. Okay. Any other questions? That's kind of the end of what I have tonight, because after that is the development of the written plan and the draft and more conversation. I would be shocked if in meeting 3 everything gets determined. My guess is going to be there's a lot of discussion in meeting 3, meeting 4, and then people go home, think about it, talk about amongst themselves, come back to meeting 4. There's more discussion, and that the draft happens after meeting 4, and then meeting 5 would be a review of it. Now, the other thing that's not in here, but we do want to talk about, and now that we know kind of monthly, it helps, we'll project out. I think at the end of meeting 3, we talked about doing a survey. When we start, the discussion is, here's what we're thinking, then we can do a survey out to the community at large that's not here and get their input. So then meeting 5, which I do think we'll have one, you present the results of that to this group. So they have their own, say 130 people discussing and whoever else they talk to, but also you've got this bigger one of the community at large. Most of the time we see that they're pretty close, but occasionally you do get that survey back and you see that committee and the community is not aligned, in which case we would need to do something else. Maybe it's town halls or something like that, but it gives the committee, when they make the recommendation to the board, that another data point to go off of, and that much more confidence that what they're doing is representing what the community wants, as a whole. Any other questions? Something you don't see that you want to see? And I got my questions answered tonight so that we can continue on for this and start putting this together more.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Brett. Item number 4, adjournment, 5:18 p.m.